So we're still on topic 6, but this is now the second part of topic 6. As promised, we now need to look at market segmentation, so breaking the market up into smaller pieces. So the idea behind this video then, what I want you to be able to do at the end of this, or once you've watched this, once we've done the activities on this, you're going to be able to tell me what a market segment is. You're going to know what product might segment using age or gender, for instance. You're going to be able to tell me what 3 benefits and drawbacks of segmentation are. You might be able to tell me how might segmentation impact television, why social class is a very popular way to segment, and also how things like the Tesco Club Card aid segmentation. Okay, first and foremost, AQA say that we only need to think about 2 particular ways of segmenting. That does mean though that we have to note these in detail. So I'm going to go through 2 of them in detail. I will mention in passing another 2 just because they do sometimes crop up, so it is good that you understand them. But before we get into the details though, a little couple of key terms here. So market segmentation is the classification, so breaking things down, of customers or potential customers into groups or even smaller subgroups, which are, that should say market segments, each of which responds differently to different products or different marketing approaches. So for instance, remember we might say that males who are between the ages of 16 to 20 might respond differently to the marketing of an iPod, for instance, than females between the ages of 60 to 65. So we would market that to those in a different way because they are different segments of the market. Segmentation analysis is where a firm uses quantitative. Remember, the way to remember that, there's a number in there. So quantitative numbers and qualitative data or information to try and discover the types of consumer who buy its products and why. Just a reminder, a consumer is the person, the end user. The buyer is the person who physically buys the goods or services. So remember the example, the main buyers of men's underwear in the United Kingdom is actually females. But the main consumer of males' underwear are males. The biggest buyer of baby food are parents, but the biggest consumer of baby foods are babies. And also a little something to remember. Segmentation we do to customers. We don't do it to markets or we do it to products. So we don't group together markets. We don't group together products. What we group together are the different customers. It is a method of putting customers into different categories. So for instance here I did gender and I did age to help a firm market its products. So demographic segmentation, this is the first one that AQA say that we must know in detail. So the main form of demographic segmentation, so demographics generally got anything to do with population, are age, gender, social class, although residential or housing methods are also popular as well. So age. For many products and services, age is a crucial influence on demand, so firms will segment on that basis. So holidays are a really good example of this. So say for instance the Club 1830 targets holidays at a specific age range, while Saga holidays are aimed at those over 50. So Club 1830, who do you think that's aimed at? Well, people between the ages of 18 and 30. Whereas Saga, as we say, aimed at 50 plus. So the activities that might go on this holiday will be distinctly different to the activities that will go on this holiday. That doesn't make one right, doesn't make one wrong. It just means that they are both targeted at different people. Large firms do try to provide a range of products that will reach all ages. So say for instance a magazine publisher will try to produce different magazines for teenagers, different for 20-year-olds, different for 30-year-olds, different for middle-aged, different for the elderly. So that's all part of, think of that market map again. So remember, our market map might have age, and it might have income. Oh, running out of space. So it might be that we have one magazine here for people who are relatively old with a high income. We might have one magazine here for younger people with a low income. So it's all about having a balanced set of products that we can sell. Gender. So some products are targeted specifically at males or females. So for instance, the market for fragrances, perfumes, is dominated by females, while attendance at sport is tended to be dominated by males. But in both cases, firms have recognised that there is a potential for growth by targeting the other gender. So say for instance we might advertise sport to males differently to how we advertise it to females. Social class. So this method classifies families according to occupation. So you might hear it, we go all the way through from it's either letters or numbers. So let's look at what they are. So now that I've talked through what each of these categories are, so A, B, C1, C2, D and E, or 1, 2, 3, N, 3M, 4 and 5. In general, social class does influence purchasing habit because class A generally receives more income than B, B generally receives more income than C, etc. However, there are some activities that may appeal to social classes regardless of income. So for example, golfers are more likely than football supporters to be in the middle classes, so A, B and C1 for instance. Residential. One of the main residential methods of segmenting according to where you live is the thing that we call ACORN. Now this stands for A, classification of residential neighbourhoods. So this segments the market according to the types of housing. So the document is available if you're interested. Come and see me because I have got a copy of it. But there are over 30 different categories of houses which are identified by this technique. So for instance, families in a detached house are expected to have very different tastes from those living in terraced houses in a rural area. So postcodes can be used to identify these segments, which helps firms to target their marketing. It's very, very accurate, this one. An example, for instance, could be if you were the head teacher of a private school, you could look at what type of housing is in an area. So if it's one-bedroomed houses, for instance, you wouldn't try to target your school there, because if it's a one-bedroom flat, there's a good chance that there won't be any children living there. If it's a six-bedroomed house, not only will there be children living there, but they might have the money to send their child to your private school. So in social class then, we've got social class or social grouping 1, which we sometimes call A, and this is for people who have professional jobs. So that's a job that you've had to go to university and have an actual qualification in order to pursue that job. So it could be a doctor, it could be a barrister, it could be a teacher, a dentist, a solicitor. The next social class, strangely, is 2 or B, and this is managerial, or it could be technical. So if you've got that type of role, you would fall into that category. Next, as I'm sure you can gather, is 3, but this one's 3N or C1. Now this is skilled, but it's non-manual work. Okay. The next one we look at is 3M, and this is C2, which is again skilled, but this is skilled manual work. So things like, for instance, a plumber might fall into that. Then we look at 4, which is D, which is partly skilled. Do excuse my writing, but remember I'm trying to write on a screen with my finger. And then we've got 4, which is E, and that's unskilled. Okay, next, geographical segmentation. Although regional variations in taste are becoming much less significant, there are still major differences in tastes and purchasing behaviour based on geographical features, so where we live, for instance. So, activities like walking. Walking is very popular if you live in the Lake District, for instance. You go out and you walk because of the fantastic scenery. You wouldn't necessarily go out for a walk if you lived in the city centre of London, because there aren't those type of sights and scenes to see. Surfing might be more popular on the coast than it is in the Peak District in the middle of the country. Theatre visits might be more attractive if you live in a town than if you live in a rural area. And night clubbing, for instance, are all activities is another activity that can be influenced by the place and where someone lives. A good one there is, you may or you may not know, there are actually two different types of the sport rugby. Rugby union is very popular in the south of the country, whereas rugby league is generally only popular in the north of the country. If you would ask someone in the south of the country whether they want peas pudding on their sandwich, they'd probably look at you very strangely. Do some research when you go to university and speak to some people who aren't from the northeast, and the vast majority won't even know what peas pudding is. So because of the fact that there's geographical segmentation, a firm wouldn't try to sell peas pudding in the south of the country, for instance. So geographical variations may be linked to the regions. So, for instance, that difference between the north and the south with rugby and peas pudding. And the differences, these might lead to differences in spending patterns. So, urban areas, people might have more money than rural areas. And it also might mean that the terrain might change. So, again, you might go walking in different areas, but you might not in others. And the climate's very much different. For instance, in the southwest, in places like Devon and Cornwall, you're looking at 5-10 degrees warmer during the summer than where we are. They don't really have the harsh winters that we have either. So as I said, AQA only make us look at demographic and geographical segmentation, but I will mention another two just because we might come across those in passing in our case studies. So lifestyle segmentation, this type of segmentation is becoming much more popular as businesses can use credit card and loyalty card records to identify the pattern of individual expenditure. So for instance, family food purchases are categorised into categories according to the tendency to buy takeaways, organic food, economy brands, health foods, etc. Or leisure pursuits are also used to segment customers for marketing purposes. So what do I mean by that? Well, Tesco, for instance, if you use their club card, so yes, you get points in return, they give you something in return, but every month I get a statement through my door saying, well, have you tried this? So they'll market something in particular to me, knowing what I bought in the past. So they might know, for instance, that I buy decaffeinated coffee, so they might say, have you tried this slightly larger jar of decaffeinated coffee? Try to sell me more of it. They might have seen that I've bought a golf magazine, so they might say that, have you seen our new range of golfing clothes? And we also might segment according to usage or frequency of purchase. So some consumers, we'll call them early adapters. I'll just write that in there to remind you. Early adopters. They like to be the first to try a new product. So, for instance, when the new iPods are released, the early adopters are the ones who will line up outside the Apple shop waiting for it to open. An interesting thing there is Apple could pretty much charge what they wanted, and these early adopters would still buy it. In contrast, though, followers are more cautious. So they're the opposite. Followers follow what the early adopters do. So an awareness of these customer types allows a firm to target the right people. So similarly, consumers can be classified according to how often they purchase a product. So whether a frequent purchaser will have a different view of a product from an occasional, casual user, for instance. So what type of segmentation should we use? Well, it sounds like a bit of a cop-out, but it really does depend. So the exact type of segmentation used depends on the business or the product. So when I'm saying depends, get used to it. It really is a useful comment. When we're talking about analysis, whenever we're talking about evaluation, it's a good way of getting in two sides of the argument. It's a good way of showing that you understand that things might go right or that things that might go wrong. So context might change, so the situations might change, the case study might change. So not every type of segmentation is used by every business. Not what's right for one company might not be right for another company. So we have to say it depends and then go on to talk about why it might work in some situations and not in another. So for example, in the case of clothing, gender is very important and so is age, especially for children's clothing. But not every type of segmentation is used by every business. So in general, organisations identify the market segment or segments that they are relevant to, that are relevant to their products or services. So products, services, and the organisation's approach to marketing is then geared around these segments. So it really does depend on what the organisation makes, where they want to try and operate, as to which segments they use. And it's a little bit like the benefits and drawbacks as well. All depends on the situation. But we can talk about some general benefits and drawbacks, and they do apply to all types of segmentation. However, the extent to which a particular organisation might benefit from segmentation does depend on basically three things. So it depends on how well a particular segment can be identified. So it might be far too difficult to decide what segment people belong to. So it might take too long, it might take too much money, in which case there's no point in doing it. But it might be really easy to segment these people. It might be that they're easy to identify and we can really, really easily put them into an age group or into a particular segment, in which case that's a benefit of segmentation. It also depends on how customer behaviour varies according to the market segment. So remember we said that segmentation is breaking the whole market down into different definable segments, definable chunks. And in those chunks we hope that people have roughly similar behaviour. So if they have roughly similar behaviour, then that's a benefit of segmentation. If people in these chunks still have relatively different behaviour, well, that then makes it a drawback of segmentation. And also, just because we recognise and we can identify and define what these segments are, and that we know what their behaviour is in these segments, we still have to be able to target them or reach them. So just because we know who our segments are doesn't mean we can automatically target them. So the benefits of segmentation then. Well, by using segmentation we can hope to increase market share. For instance, an organisation can identify market segments that have not been reached and adapt its products and marketing to reach those segments. So for example, Mothercare, the business that sells and produces child's products, a couple of years extended their age range of the products, so it didn't just look at babies, but it was trying to attract older children and their mothers. It can also help to assist new product development. So gaps in market segments, so remember, think of that market map again. So is there a gap here that we could target, because all our products are over here somewhere? Gaps in market segments can be used to indicate the scope for introducing new products. So originally, the software offered with new computers, so think about when you got your first Windows computer, the only software that came free with it tended to be games. But these offers have now been extended to appeal to more segments. So Microsoft Office, for instance, with Word and PowerPoint and Excel, you get photo processing, you get music and educational software. So hopefully they're appealing not just to people who will use a computer for games, but for people who use it for homework, people who will use it for businesses. We might also use it to extend products into new markets. So it's very difficult to believe it now, but mobile phones were never designed for you and I to use them. They were never designed for children to use. They were purely designed for businesses to use. It was only when people who were selling the phones, the phone companies, realised that teenagers all had a specific need, and a very similar need of possibly wanting to do things like text messaging, and once businesses realised that everyone had a need for connecting to the internet, that's when they started changing the marketing of mobile phones to attract other people. It also helps us to identify the best ways to market a product. So for instance, a company that recognises its customers' characteristics can target its advertising media used by that market segment. So for instance, someone in social class A, so that's the professional class, remember, is most likely to read the Times and the Telegraph, whereas someone in social class E is more likely to read something like the Star or the Sun. Similarly, promotional methods and messages can be modified to suit different segments. For instance, young people prefer different images to older people. Another example here is advertising during breaks, for instance, commercial breaks on television. So you might see a different type of product advertised during the day when Jeremy Kyle's on. So you often see that that's bingo products, or these payday loans, things like Wonga, because there's a different type of person watching the television during the day than someone who's watching it, say, during Coronation Street. What about the drawbacks of market segmentation? Well, there is a difficulty in identifying the most important segment for a product. So successful segmentation does require that market segments are identifiable. So we've got to be able to decide what they are. They've got to be reachable. So we've got to be able to get to them and communicate with them. And distinct. So they need to have different characteristics. But in practice, though, a business may be unable to categorize its customers. So some segments, like whether you're male or female, so your gender, are very easy to identify. But it's much more difficult to put consumers of bread, for instance, into categories. Who are you? Who do you buy bread? Just because I'm male and I'm aged between 30 and 35, does that mean I buy white bread, brown bread? Do I have a particular need for it? Do I change my mind all the time? Same with household cleaners or pillows, anything. It's very difficult to categorise just because I'm a certain age and I'm male that I'll buy a particular type of cleaner or a particular type of pillow, for instance. There might be problems reaching the chosen segment with your marketing. So lifestyle categories in particular are difficult to identify or locate. So which media would you use to attract primary school parents on a national scale? It's far too difficult because primary school children's parents are different the whole country over. So in general, socio-economic class, remember that's your A's, your B's, your C1, C2s, these tend to be the most difficult of the demographic segments to target. There's also a problem recognizing changes in the segment and how they're interested in our products. So markets are dynamic, so they're ever changing, and businesses cannot assume that an existing segment will always stay loyal to a product. So thus a business must constantly research their market segments. And also meeting the needs of customers who were not included in the segment that we're originally targeting. So what about, as I've got here, what about everyone else? If we start to just emphasize one market segment, it may lead to a business ignoring all the others. What happens if they're concentrating on one segment but other segments are growing? We would never know because we're just concentrating on this one segment. As I sometimes like to do, I'll give you a little tip here, a little examiner's tip. So when we are looking at questions on market segmentation, and there often are questions on market segmentation, part of your answer you should identify and then focus all of your arguments on that market segmentation. So this helps with your application. You're only talking about the segment in the case study. So here's an example. Suppose that your target market is young males. So in your answer, you need to make sure that you're suggesting that the firm should place adverts in magazines which are read by the young males. And it's using messages, so using the right type of adverts with the right type of pictures or characters, so the right celebrities that will excite their interest. So using pictures, the really famous example that's been around recently is using David Beckham to get products that businesses who are targeting younger males who they want to use. So Gillette, for instance, they were trying to reduce their target audience, the age of their target audience, so they started using David Beckham because they knew that younger men would be interested in him saying that these products were effective. The features of the product should be those that will most appeal to young men. So you're trying to point out in your answer that the business has to focus on the features of the product that will appeal to young men, because young men in this question on market segmentation is your chosen segment. So that's how we would use market segmentation as a little bit of application here. So try to focus your answer on whichever segments are apparent in the case study. Okay, at the beginning of this little presentation then we said that there would be 6 success criteria. So what you need to do now though is go through these 6 questions and think, can I answer them now? So, what is market segmentation? What product might segment using age or gender? So I need 1 for age, 1 for gender, at least 1. I want at least 3 benefits and 3 drawbacks of segmentation. How might segmentation impact on TV? I'll give you the clue. Think about adverts. We did mention it in the video. Why is social class a popular way to segment? And finally, how does the Tesco Club Card aid segmentation for Tesco? Remember, the Club Card collects information on everything that we buy when we're in Tesco.